There's so much of this going on that I'm alarmed at where we're going. We've borrowed more in a shorter period of time than we ever have in our history. The ultimate is that there are actually people in our government now promising socialism. People say, oh, that's not true. Well, we've now elected people from the Democrat Socialist Party, the Democrat Socialists of America, AOC and the squad. They're members of the Socialist Party. It used to be people said, oh, well, I'm not really a liberal, I'm a progressive. Now they're openly admitting they are socialists. My wife and I wrote a book about this. It's called The Case Against Socialism. And people say, well, why do you have to write a book about socialism? Wasn't it debunked 100 years ago? Didn't Milton Friedman and, all the others, didn't they actually debunk? So they did. But if you interview young people right now, 50% of them say, oh, we ought to try socialism. The problem is we've tried socialism. They haven't read their history. Heard of Stalin? Have you ever heard of Hitler? People say, oh, Hitler wasn't a socialist. Well, his party was the National Socialist Workers' Party. Mao, 45 million people died from a famine created by the government. The government came and told the farmers they had to go build earthen dams instead of working the fields. And then they said they had to plant the crops closer. Then they said you had to dig down a meter and a half, 3 feet into the ground to plant the seeds. What kind of moron would do that? Well, governments do moronic things and people starve by the millions of people. Why is that important? The head of Black Lives Matter, you may be excited about her because she just bought her $4 million home. And her last home, she's not really for a wall on our southern border, but there's kind of some riffraff getting around her house. So she's building a wall around her house to keep people away from her house. But the head of Black Lives Matter wrote a book last year, and there's an interview. A woman comes up to her, and it's a YouTube interview. And they said, oh, I loved your book. Your book was so good. It reminded me of Mao and of Mao's Little Red Book. In Mao's China, you were forced to carry the book with you. He printed them by the billions, but you had them on you or they beat you. But the book was Marxism, socialism. The government owns everything. And it led to famine. But the head of Black Lives Matter is just giggling away saying, you get it, you get it. You understand the parallels between my book and Mao's Little Red Book. So the head of Black Lives Matter is either ignorant of history or complicit with violence. There is no in between. You can't be a fan of Mao, but here's the problem. You know who's giving money to Black Lives Matter? Coca-Cola, Major League Baseball, all the big corporations are donating money. You think, is this a conspiracy? Who's paying these rioters that are all over the country? They're staying in $1,000 hotels. They're on planes flying to do rioting and to cause mayhem in our cities. Well, it's unfortunately, it's a big corporation and it's America, are all woke and they're all giving money to Black Lives Matter. But this isn't like the NAACP. This isn't against racism. These are racists that you're giving the money to. These are people teaching that the black kids should sit on one side and the white kids sit on the other side, and we should tell all of them that the white kids are the oppressors. That's what they're wanting to teach in our schools. There are people who are admittedly and openly fans of Mao Zedong, the guy who killed millions of people in China. When my wife and I were attacked by a mob in D.C., it was all over the video. You can see it. We were afraid for our lives. The head of Black Lives Matter in Louisville, you know what she said? She said, I could see that they had fear in their eyes, and that's the way they need to live. That's the way I have to live. They should have to live that way too. Who would want that? I don't want Nancy, I don't agree with anything Nancy Pelosi or Biden's for, but I don't want violence on them. I don't want them to live in fear. And it isn't really about the color of your skin. The people who attacked us were predominantly black, but the police officers who saved our lives were predominantly black. It's nothing about race. It's about right and wrong. Marauding and mayhem and throwing Molotov cocktails at the police, that's not what we want in our cities.
The Office of Civil Rights sent a letter to Connecticut saying that boys can't compete with girls in sports, or they should be forced to allow boys to compete in girls' sports. If you're confirmed, will you enforce that Office of Civil Rights opinion?
Hello, Senator. Thank you for the question. I understand that there are a lot of concerns about that. If confirmed, it's my responsibility and my privilege to make sure that we're following our civil rights of all students. And that includes activities that they may engage in high school or in athletics.
What do you think in general about boys running in girls' track meets like they've been doing in Connecticut?
I think that it's critically important that education systems and educators respect the rights of all students, including students who are transgender, and that they are afforded the opportunities that every other student has to participate in extracurricular activity.
Does it bother you that like the top 20% of boys running in track meets beat all of the girls in the state, and that it, would be, completely destroy girls' athletics? The girls are being pushed out. If they don't make the finals in the state meet, they don't get college scholarships, that it's really detrimental to girls' sports. Do you worry about having boys running girls' track meets?
I recognize and appreciate the concerns and the frustrations that are expressed. I've, as Commissioner of Education, have had conversations with families who have felt the way you just described it, and families of students who are transgender. So I understand that this is a challenge. I look forward to working with you and others to.
Do you think it's fair to have boys running in the girls' track meet?
I think it's appropriate I think it's the legal responsibility of schools to provide opportunities for students to participate in activities, and this includes students who are transgender.
So you don't have a problem then with boys running in the girls' track meet, swimming meets, name it. You're okay then with boys competing with girls?
Respectfully, Senator, I think I answered the question. I believe schools should offer the opportunity for students to engage in extracurricular activities, even if they're transgender. I think that's their right.
All right. Well, a lot of us think that that's bizarre, not very fair. I come from a family that has a lot of girls who have competed in college athletics, have been state champions, and frankly, some boy that's 6'2" competing against my 5'4" niece doesn't sound very fair. I think most people in the country think it's bizarre, that it's just completely bizarre and unfair that people, and you're going to run the Department of Education, you've got no problem with it. That concerns me. And I think this kind of thing is going to lead to really just the vast majority of America just wondering, who are these people that think it's okay? From what planet are you from? I mean, to think it's okay that boys would compete with girls in a track meet, that somehow would be fair. I wonder where feminists are on this. I wonder where the people who supported women's sports are on this. I mean, we all going to be okay with hulking 6'4" guys, wrestling against girls? It just makes no sense whatsoever. And so I think the fact that you seem to be afraid to answer the question, or you basically do answer the question by saying it's okay without saying it's okay, really is a statement to a real problem we have, and a disconnect between what middle America and what most Americans actually believe. I even think most Democrats don't believe girls should run in the boys' track meet. Boys should run in the girls' track meet. So I'm disappointed in the